In this video, we're going to be taking a look at the weapons in Dead Island 2. We'll be doing a full and also a sort of general analysis of the weapons in the game, and it is of course important to note though that not all of these weapons have been confirmed, if any, to be honest. These are mainly just theories, but of course we're also going to have a brief overview of the different weapon types that you'll be able to use within the game, as well as looking at some specific types of weapons that could be within Dead Island 2. But like I said, of course, the game hasn't released yet, so not everything has been confirmed, so some of this may not be entirely true when the game does release, but for the most part this should be pretty accurate. So this is a full analysis of the weapons in Dead Island 2, but some of the knowledge will be based on the previous Dead Island games and all of the promotional material for Dead Island 2, as some weapons do appear within those trailers and everything like that, including melee weapons, firearms, etc. So this will be going through all the variety of weapons that are likely to appear within Dead Island 2. First of all, there are of course melee weapons. Melee weapons are likely to be a significant part of the game, as they have been in previous Dead Island games. Melee weapons are often more accessible than firearms, as they don't require ammunition and can be found throughout the game's world. Additionally, melee combat can be more satisfying for some players, as it requires more skill and strategy rather than just simply shooting at enemies from a distance. Of course, it's not for everyone, but within Dead Island 2, it looks like it's going to be a major focus. Within the recent gameplay reveal, which I did a full analysis on, a link to that is in the description and at the end of the video, we saw a lot of interactions and some really smooth gameplay when using the melee weapons. We could see some of the players being able to, slice through heads and everything like that, and there are some really clean animations and interactions for that combat. So it looks like melee weapons and melee combat in general is going to be a major focus for Dead Island 2, as it was, to be honest, in Dead Island 1. We saw a lot of melee combats, particularly right at the start of the game, since you don't really get access to weapons straight away. You're using your standard melee combat, such as, even a broomstick is something you use at the beginning of Dead Island. That is something that is going to probably be the case within Dead Island 2, as obviously it's a similar type of game, of course, and yeah, it looks like melee combat will still be playing a massive part within the game, as we've seen within the gameplay trailers and everything like that for Dead Island 2. The inclusion of various melee weapons such as baseball bats, machetes, knives, and sledgehammers provides players with a range of options and does allow you to customize your playstyle. The effectiveness of each weapon will likely depend on your skill level and playstyle, as well as the type of enemy that you are facing. Firearms are also likely to be an important part of the game as well, particularly for players who prefer ranged combat. Firearms can be particularly effective against large groups of enemies or against particularly strong enemies. However, ammunition can be scarce in a game like Dead Island 2, we know that from the first one, so players will need to be strategic in their use of firearms. And additionally, the game is likely to feature a variety of firearms such as pistols, shotguns, assault rifles, and sniper rifles, which we'll look into more specifically in a moment, which will allow players to choose the weapon that best suits their playstyle. The effectiveness of each firearm will likely depend on the player's skill level and playstyle, like we mentioned with the melee weapons, as well as the type of enemy that you are of course facing. So yeah, of course firearms will be part of Dead Island 2. It might not be the primary source of weapons, but of course they will be there, and they will probably be used a fair amount. And there are of course going to also be explosives. They are another type of weapon that is likely to be featured within Dead Island 2. Explosives can be particularly effective, of course, against large groups of enemies, and can also be used to create traps or to take out enemies from a distance. We saw this in the gameplay reveal, where a line of electricity was placed on the ground and was able to take out quite a large amount of zombies. Not only that, it can also be used to take out enemies from a distance. You could throw a grenade into an area where there are loads of enemies, and of course that will be pretty effective. However, like firearms, explosives can be pretty scarce, and you will of course need to be very strategic when you are using the explosive weapons. So as you can see from that quick overview of the weapons in Dead Island 2, the variety is likely to provide players with a range of options and allow them to customize their playstyle. The inclusion of different types of weapons such as melee weapons, firearms, and explosives will also appeal to different types of players. The effectiveness of each weapon will likely depend on the player's skill level and playstyle, and of course the specific weapon at hand, as well as the type of enemy that they are facing. And that was a quick overview of the weapons, but now we'll look at some theories of specific weapons that will be part of the game. And to do this, I'm going to be on the Dead Island wiki, and we do actually have a list of weapons that, well, supposedly will be appearing within the game. Some of these have been supposedly seen within the trailers, and others are just theories of what should be part of the game. First of all, there is the katana. Now, the katana is going to be a pretty standard weapon that will definitely feature. The katana is a very powerful but brittle, sharp weapon. It deals high damage and has above average force for a sharp weapon, but has a low to average durability. Due to it being a two-handed weapon, it has a long reach and can hit unarmed enemies. The katana is a very powerful weapon and a useful tool for any player. This is something that will definitely be within the game, I think that is for sure. And of course, we also have a classic metal pipe. We see this within Dead Island, and I'm sure it will be within Dead Island 2. Like all other basic weapons in the game, metal pipes do not scale their stats with a character's level, making them all but useless by the time the player starts finding them. In addition, they cannot be modified, cannot be upgraded, cannot be repaired at a workbench. At least that's how it works within Dead Island, so it's likely to be the case within Dead Island 2, but of course that could change slightly. Either way, it's a pretty basic weapon that may be useful at the start of the game, but won't be useful for very long. And then of course we have the pickaxe, that's another standard weapon. But then we're on to the machete, which is another pretty standard weapon as well, but the machete could be pretty useful throughout the entire game, as it's a very sharp melee weapon, which is featured within loads of games. And of course we all know how a machete works, and I'm sure it'll be useful for taking out some zombies, depending on of course the machete at hand, since there's probably going to be different variants of it. And then there is actually a nail hammer. Now a nail hammer would be a pretty interesting weapon. We see it within Dead Island, so just like the standard hammer, the nail hammer is an alright low level weapon for new players who need something a little stronger lasting than of course a metal pipe. The weapon has medium damage and force with decent durability and a low stamina use, making it a decent all-round weapon for most scenarios. It can take on single or pairs of walkers or the lone infected, but due to having a short weapon range, it struggles to take on multiple enemies or larger tougher enemies like thugs. However, it does accept some mods, albeit a small selection, which does help its longevity somewhat. So a pretty useful weapon there that may be useful for quite a decent amount of the game, with it being decently powerful and not using up too much stamina. And then of course we do have brass knuckles and a chainsaw, and there are also bear claws. These are pretty standard, and of course there's some classic Dead Island weapons that will no doubt be part of Dead Island 2, and I'm sure something like a chainsaw will be pretty cool and have some amazing interactions within the new game, and will definitely, yeah, it's going to be pretty smooth taking out some zombies with that. Then of course we have the spade and a shovel, pretty standard weapons, might not be that good, but will be a decent melee weapon at the start of the game. And then, you know, a golf club, a wrench and stuff like that, a baseball bat and a knife, really standard stuff that we see within Dead Island games, and I'm sure we'll see again. And now we're getting on to some more interesting weapons. First of all, we have a claymore. This is definitely going to be some sort of trap that will probably be part of the game. It's an easy way to take out some zombies. For example, you may be noticing a zombie sort of pattern of where it tends to locate, and during its path you could place a claymore, so then of course it will explode. And then of course there is a bolt action rifle, something, you know, that will probably be featured within the game. It's likely there'll be some sniper rifles, so you can't go wrong with a bolt action rifle. And now we're onto a crossbow. Now a crossbow would be a really cool feature, similar to a bolt action rifle, but it will be quieter, easy to take out some enemies if you're trying to remain hidden. And then we actually have something pretty cool, and that is a nail gun. Now compared to standard pistols, nail guns have slightly higher base damage per shot, but also have a slower fire rate, a longer reload time, do less damage on critical hits, and also have a lower headshot damage multiplier. They also accept fewer modifications than most pistols, only accepting the hooligan gun and rifle mods, as well as the shotgun mods. The nail gun holds 10 nails in the magazine, higher than a heavy pistol that holds 9 shots, but lower than a standard pistol which has 15 rounds. The other major drawback of the nail gun over a pistol is the lack of sights. This makes going for headshots very tricky, as there's nothing to aim up your shot with, which can result in missed shots and possibly losing ammo if you can't find it. So of course it can be risky, but a pretty cool gun when it works well. And then to finish things off, we've got some standard firearms. We've got a pistol, a revolver, an SMG, a rifle, a shotgun, and then we also have Molotovs, another, you know, classic throwable weapon. And that's a brief overview of some specific weapons that will definitely be within Dead Island 2, I'm sure of that. Of course there's a possibility they won't be, but I think it's pretty likely they'll make their way into the game. Pretty classic Dead Island weapons and feature, you know, within loads of different types of games, and I have no doubt they'll be part of Dead Island 2 and play a pretty big part too. So there we go, that is a brief overview and a full analysis really of all the weapons we know so far that will arrive within Dead Island 2. So that does just about wrap up things here. Now I have done a video where I actually go over everything we know so far about Dead Island 2, and if you're interested in watching that, then a link to that video is on the screen now, and you can go ahead and join me over there.